Well, thank you. Good morning, Your Worship, councillors, our committee members from the Rural Lakes and Tato boards. No mai haramai. Welcome to our Strategy, Policy and Finance Committee meeting this morning, the 9th of September 2021. And we are being live streamed. So to everyone out there who's watching this morning, welcome to you all to our meeting. Before I ask Una to explain a few of our Zoom etiquettes, I am going to go straight to Councillor Donaldson, who's going to open our meeting with a karakia this morning. Morena, Dave. Thank you.
Morena, Madam Chair and councillors. Tūtaua mai I runga, tūtaua mai I raro, tūtaua mai I roto, tūtaua mai I waho. Kia tau ai te Māori tū, te Māori ora, ki te katoa, haumie huie, tai kie.
Thank you, Councillor Donaldson. So thank you. I'm going to ask Una, thank you. I know it's good that we get reminded of our Zoom etiquette so that the meetings can run pretty seamlessly. Thank you.
Good morning and thank you, Madam Chair. So just to go through our Zoom etiquette again, just briefly, today we will be again using the raise your hands icon if you wish to signal a question or signal a part in the debate. We'll also be using the raise your hand icon also so that we can undertake voting when it comes to passing a motion. So thank you very much for that. Also that we just ask that while the presenter is talking and the chair, that everybody keep themselves on mute, and that just stops the rustle and all the background noise when we have so many of us on a Zoom all at once. If you do wish to abstain for any part of the meeting, can you please send me a personal chat? You can find chat at the bottom of your screen. If you click on that and then select me as the person to send the message to, you just need to write abstain in the message and hit enter, and then we will be able to record that for the minutes. Other than that, I think that is all I have in terms of our update today. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Una. And Una, can I also ask if you could assist me, please, as the questions, as councillors raise their hands, if you could just alert me to who is. Thank you very much. That's very helpful if you can undertake that. Thank you so much. Thank you. So we'll move on. Any apologies, please? No apologies, thank you. Declarations of interest.
Could we have Dave Donaldson has his hand raised?
Thank you, Councillor Donaldson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just signalling that I will declare a conflict of interest in relation to the presentation by Mountain Bike Events Limited and confidential.
Thank you for that, so noted. Urgent items not on the agenda.
Sorry, Madam Chair, and also myself, Councillor Tapsell, just going to indicate in the confidential there's an organisation and part of the grants that I'll just signal maybe a conflict of interest, but just letting you know now.
Thank you very much. Thank you. No urgent items. Thank you.
There appears to be none.
No, thank you. Appears to be none. Thank you. So we're going to move now. Oh no, actually, because we are in. We've just moved down, thank goodness. We've come from 4 now to 3, level 3, and we're in level Delta. Level 2, but it's Delta level 2, which is a little bit different. So look, with your indulgence, councillors, your worship, I'd just like to ask, perhaps if I could go to Jocelyn, just to ask Jocelyn about some of the changes that we've had to make for some of our services. And I mean, I know it's early days. We've just gone into level 2, Delta level 2. Can you just give us an update there, please? I just wonder, I think councillors would probably be interested in that. Thank you.
Morena tātou I te whānau. Just want to do a quick whip through of some of the, and provide a bit of an update on the projects that we've got going on and some of the services that we're getting up and going again as we have moved into level 2. So just for your information, this Howard Morrison Performing Arts Centre site was closed during level 4, reopened at level 3, and our works continue under level 2. Hawkins have provided assurances around COVID mitigations, and they've got a really, really strong health and safety culture, so we're very confident there. There may be some issues with contractors that are from Auckland who are still locked down there, or if we've got goods coming from offshore. So the impact of this on the completion date's yet to be determined, but based on our experience last year, we included a COVID clause in the contract, which will help us to navigate any changes and makes it quite clear. So it gives us a good process to follow. Meanwhile, the work on our theatre services, which is your lights, camera, action stuff, seating and all that, are underway, and procurement packages are being developed. So at the lakefront, works are back underway for our playground, toilet, and Heber in the process of moving the lakefront operators to their short-term location to enable our stage 5 works to start. Luckily, our contractors have provided good evidence of their COVID measures, and these have been reviewed and approved. We've got resource consent now for stage 5, so the head contract's due to be signed, and no change in the museum with design work uninterrupted at this stage. But travel out of Auckland for testing may be impacted. We'll keep you updated. With respect to Te Akamoti, our library, we reopened yesterday for our first day open since lockdown. Numbers were really steady throughout the day, averaging 100 people an hour. So an average day is about 120 an hour. We, by the end of the day, had seen 700 people come through the door. We had really awesome security guards managing the entrance and exit. So luckily, they managed to control the flow really well. Nobody objected to wearing their masks. There were no issues around signing in or contact tracing, high levels of compliance with that respect. And so the returns and issuing of books are back up and running. Our DHB clinic was able to get going again, and library deliveries are getting back up and running. With an increase of about 50% increase in borrowing from our e-library, which is, of course, our electronic books. We've had to shut down a number of computers in the library. There are only 7 of 28 operating at the moment because we are observing the 2-metre distancing. But we have put on a time limit to ensure people can have access. And staff are just working with schools to determine when we can restart those services. In terms of our open spaces, maintenance at level 3 for Infracore up and running, and those are continuing with Delta level 2. Our toilet blocks and playgrounds have been reopened with additional messaging about keeping 2-metre spacings and hygiene and all those types of informations, QR codes and the like. Outside sports are able to resume, but they need to be able to manage and meet the D2 guidelines, and codes are considering how they finish their seasons, if there are finals, and how that will work, and we'll work closely with them on that. Our aquatic centre was able to reopen yesterday for swimming, lane swimming, aqua fitness and learning to swim. So numbers using the indoor pools are limited as per recommendations from the government, as is the same with the outdoor. And of course, masks are mandatory. We're watching the New Zealand sport guidelines for play and active recreation, because they did temporarily remove their guidelines from the website as they were seeking governance guidance. So we'll just keep an eye on those and make sure that our community are well informed as if we need to make any changes to the way we're providing our services. Our markets, because on advice of our civil defence group and our emergency team, we won't be having a farmers market this Sunday, but we are proposing to restart the night market and farmers market next week. We just want to make sure that our guidelines are correct and we're able to meet those, and that our participants, the people that bring their fare to the different markets, are able to treat it, meet those expectations as well. And of course, our EEC team are busily reorganising and helping to move events where appropriate and find alternative dates where possible. We've got our parking, noise control, animal control and all our other regulatory and compliance functions up and running again. And these are occurring with the appropriate safety precautions in place. Our pounder's open again, so that includes rehoming doggies in there that need to find themselves a new home. And of course, our guardians continue to patrol the CBD and some of the wider area, both on foot, and we're using vehicles and bike patrols into some of our residential areas, which have been quite well welcomed. And of course, CCTV monitoring and activities have continued throughout all our alert levels. So that's just a brief trot through the services. The team are really excited and pleased to be able to be back and serving our community. So thank you.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Jocelyn, as our community wellbeing DCE. Thank you for that update. I have to say that within a couple of hours of opening yesterday, I visited the aquatic centre and I was quite amazed at the number of people who were there, but it was very seamless and very well, obviously people have put the thinking into it. And as you've just said, you've certainly had to hit the deck running. So thank you for that update. Stavros, as our DCE for the infrastructure and environmental solutions, Stavros, because you're also on the crisis management team. So perhaps an update there would be good.
Morena tatu katoa. Through you, Madam Chair, basically through navigating through the various levels of the alerts from level 4 to level 2 at the moment, we have two distinct sort of parallel bodies in the organization. We've got a crisis management team, and obviously our emergency operations center was activated. The crisis management team had a primary concern of maintaining our ability to provide utility or lifeline services to the community and to ensure the safety of our own staff and our contractor staff. Probably, as I noted in the last O&M committee, throughout that period, we were able to continue to deliver about $40 million of drinking water each day, manage about 20 million litres of wastewater in a way that meets our resource concerns and our environmental reputation and statutory obligations. We collected about 8,000 waste bins each day, and we had our contractors managing reactive maintenance to make sure all our utility lifeline services were at the right level. In parallel with that, our emergency operations center was activated, and its main function has been to ensure that we provide support to our welfare agencies, NGOs and government agencies that were in charge of looking after people in actual need. Our welfare team responded to a few hundreds of requests for support and services. We have provided a purchase order to supermarkets, to allow people to go and purchase food and necessary stuff for their families. However, as we move through to level 2 now, yesterday I have deactivated our emergency operations center and I have placed them into a standby mode. And the reason for that, of course, is that we're now transitioning to the business as usual. Our contractors are able to undertake more than just reactive maintenance into our utility services, but also because we have more staff on board, we should be able to respond and reactivate our EOC as soon as possible. So we're looking forward now to continue to provide our core services, but also at the same time to deliver all the elements of our business plan that deal with the future growth and future stability of our core utility services. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Stavros. Jeff, I just wondered, as our CEO, is there anything that has popped up that you hadn't expected and it's given you any cause for concern, or we're pretty much getting back to some semblance of business as usual?
Thank you, Chair. Look, I think I would say that responding to the COVID challenges of lockdowns for this organisation, like any organisation, in fact, has been extremely challenging. What we've had to do is to try and get a balance between ensuring that essential services are provided. We've had to ensure that we've stood up an emergency management response should it actually be needed. And at the same time, we've actually managed, I think, to provide a continuity of services while also ensuring that people who come into our facilities today, as Jocelyn has outlined, are safe and can be confident that the area that they're entering into is actually a well-managed area. So I think what I would impress on the committee is actually the talent level in our organisation and in our staff group. I think what we've seen, for example, in the aquatic centre that you used, I think yesterday morning, a group of people that were really striving to achieve that balance to say, how do we open our facility, but how do we also keep people safe? And that's been replicated across our entire organisation. So I just want to really just acknowledge actually the work that our staff have undertaken over this period. It's been, as I say, a huge challenge, but something that I'm incredibly proud as to how they've responded to.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I just wonder, as I'm just going to move on, Your Worship, is there anything that you'd like to add?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yes, we've met every morning. The Deputy Mayor and myself have met with our CEO and Craig every morning, where we've raised incidental issues that have cropped up overnight that might need a political eye over or organisational. And it's been very smooth, and I'd like to congratulate the executive and the whole team of council. This has been nothing like the first Delta outbreak, and we seem to know what to do and swung into it very quickly. I'm sure as politicians, we're looking forward to getting together face to face. That's been our challenge, as not meeting, but I think we've been very lucky in Rotorua and managed extremely well. And there's a cautious optimism about lowering to level 2 proper, but I get the message overwhelmingly from business leaders and the community that we want to proceed safely. So thank you, team.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. Well, there you are. Just a bit of an update, councillors and Your Worship, just so that we know that the city does carry on, even when we're in lockdown. There's things that have to carry on, and that's been done very well. So we'll move on now to our agenda. And there are 2 sets of minutes that need to be confirmed this morning. The first one is on page 6, confirmation of the Strategy, Policy and Finance Committee meetings, the minutes of the 12th of August, 2021. Could I please have a mover and a seconder for the motion?
A mover is Sandra Kaifong and seconded by Councillor Donaldson.
Thank you very much. Are there any corrections, amendments to our or corrections to the minutes? If not,
There appeared to be none.
thank you. I'll put that motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary?
Use
sorry.
your right hand. Use your hand signal.
Thank you.
Thank you. That is carried.
Thank you very much. Our second set of minutes on page 11. That's the, I'd like a mover and a seconder, please, that the minutes of the Strategy, Policy and Finance Committee meeting held on the 26th of August 2021 be confirmed as a true and correct record.
That was Mr. Thomas and seconded by Councillor Maxwell.
Thank you. I'll put that motion now. All those in favour, please raise your right hand.
And that is carried.
Thank you. Thank you, councillors. Thank you. So we'll go to staff reports, which are on page 15. The first staff report. Thank you. And that's the Kaharoa and Penny Road rally sprint. Objection to proposed road closure. So may I have a mover and a seconder to receive the report, please?
It's moved by Councillor McPherson and seconded by Mayor Chadwick.
Thank you. I'll put that motion that the report Kaharoa and Penny Road rally sprint, objection to proposed road closure be received.
Point of order.
Sorry?
Sorry, point of order. I have some additional information that I'd like to share before we put this motion to everybody.
Well, we'll have to receive the report first.
Okay, fine. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for that. It has been moved and seconded. So I'll put the motion now. All those in favour, please raise your hand.
That is carried.
It's carried. Thank you. might get Stavros to speak to the report, and then you've got some further information that you want to share when the report, Councillor McPherson. Is that correct? Thank you. Thank you very much. Stavros, I think you're going to speak to this.
Madam Chair, Regan will introduce that. Thank you.
Sorry, who's that? Oh, Regan.
Regan Fraser, yeah. Thank you.
Regan.
Morena tata katoa. I'll largely take the report as read and am happy to take any questions.
Thank you.
So we have a question from Mayor Steve, followed by Councillor Kumar, followed by Councillor Bentley, followed by Councillor Wang, and followed by Councillor McPherson.
Oh, thank you. Sorry, could you please give those to me again? I beg your pardon, Una.
Yep, I'll give you, it's Councillor, it's the Mayor and then Councillor Kumar. And we'll get through those two first and then we can move on to the next speakers.
Thank you very much. Your Worship.
Yes, thank you, Regan. Thank you for the report. This seems to be a perennial that comes up, well, a hardy annual almost, that comes up every time this event is going to be being held. And am I right that these are the same objectives that we seem to get every time? I've actually had the pleasure of taking part in this event as a guest, and it's a phenomenal event, and I would hope that we support this. And it's very carefully managed too by road management, so traffic management, and the event organisers themselves. So my question, Regan, is this is the same process that we seem to face every time this event goes on, am I right?
Through the chair, and thank you for the question. Yes, you're 100%. It does come up every time this event is held, correct.
And we have Councillor Kumar.
Thank you, Councillor Kumar.
Good morning, Madam Chair, and good morning, everyone. Yes, I've read the report also, and in total, it says that they dropped leaflets there. But in total, how many leaflets were dropped by MBOC? And as a result, how many supported them? They do not say how many are supporting them. They are just showing that there is one that has objected, but it doesn't, because there's a lot that won't be bothered. But speaking to a few people there seem to be a lot of people that are against it as well, rather than, labeling that there's just one person who is angry. But I don't even think that the objectors of what he is speaking about through his experience and grievances is really mitigated very nicely by MBOC. And even though it's just one, we should not think that one person is only representing themselves. They could have a lot of people behind them, because not a lot of people like to write and communicate. So I believe, while I'm not saying that I'm supporting this or not supporting this, I would like a little bit more fair objective from this objector's point of view.
Thank you. I think the paper clearly sets out the process that's been undergone. But so thank you for that, Councillor Kumar. Una, we have another few.
We do. I'll just remind councillors through you, Madam Chair, that we are in question time. And so can we please ensure for the ease of the meeting that our questions are nice and succinct through to the presenter, please. Our next councillor with the question is Councillor Bentley, followed by Councillor Wang.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Bentley.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for the opportunity to speak. And good morning to you. With regard to this rally, is it actually a local organised event, or is it, to put it simply, is it out-of-towners coming into our area to take advantage of our roads?
Well, I think it's an event that's been held here, but of course it does have local participants as well. So, but it is a bay-wide. I understand it's. I bet get Regan. I think Regan. Yes, thank you, Regan. If you could just respond.
Yeah, thank you for the question, and I think you nailed it on the head there. This is a regional organisation which incorporates local members as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Wang.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Morena Regan. My question really was around, I know that Motorsport Bay of Plenty have provided assurance to the ejector that any customers who need access to the business would be safely escorted with minimum delay. Has that same assurance been given to surrounding farms in regards to stocking trucks and logging trucks?
I think anybody that would have raised that. Thank you, Regan.
Yeah, so I guess it wasn't just a leaflet drop. So they did go around door to door to talk with everyone there. And if somebody wasn't at their home or business, the leaflet was left, which did invite anyone to talk to the organisers. But we do advertise again on this decision. And if it was to go ahead, anybody can get in contact any point up to the day, and the organisers are more than happy to try and facilitate any movements of vehicles and or people. Thank you.
Thanks, Regan. And I'm really assured with that they've provided proof for the public liability insurance and their traffic management plan and health and safety plan as well. So thanks for that.
Thank you.
We have Councillor McPherson, followed by Councillor Tapsell, followed by Councillor Maxwell.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor McPherson.
Thank you, Chair. I don't have a question, but I do have additional information. Would you like me to hold it until after the questions?
Yes, I'll take the other two questions and then we'll just come back to you if that's, thank you very much. Councillor Tapsell.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Hi, Regan. The question that I have this morning is just regarding rally sport as a professional sport. There's or could be a perceived opinion within the community that a rally sprint and encouraging rally sport in our community would also encourage unlawful sort of rally driving around the community. So have we had any issues in our community of people unlawfully rally driving? And I ask that because I do want to actually support how professional Motorsport Bay of Plenty have been and sort of squash that opinion that this could be supporting unlawful behaviour, because I mean it is a professional sport, and that would be as silly as us saying that rugby players will go around the community tackling people. So is there are we aware of any actual issues that we've had in our community in the past of unlawful driving?
Thank you for the question, Councillor. And it's quite wide, and I guess it's anecdotally we do hear, of course, throughout the whole district, there are members of our public who don't treat our roads with law or respect for people around them. Specifically with this event, the objector, obviously, as you will have noted in the appendix, has stated there's been bad behaviour before. We as a council, however, don't generally receive those types of reports directly. They should go through the police, but I'm happy to follow that up with them. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Maxwell and then Mrs. Trumper.
Thank you.
Thank you. Morena koutou. Thank you, Regan. Good report. The question I have is mentioned in the report was how his business is affected on the day. So the question is, how I see where we were willing to help. How were the organisers going to make this work, say, on a race day, Regan?
Thank you for the question, Councillor. So as the report mentions, the offer had previously been made on the same event. It wasn't taken up, but the organisers know where the vehicles are at a certain time and know when it is safe to move across roads. So it's via contact with them. I've got somebody I need to get here, and then they will organise that to make sure it happens in a safe way. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm sure the organisers would try as much as they could to help there, knowing that it would cause inconvenience to some people living on the road. Mrs. Trumper?
Morena Regan, just wanting to check, have Kaharoa School sort of identified what they're actually doing? Because I'm aware that some of the schools use events such as these for fundraising ideas and opportunities, and I'm just wondering, that balance whether the objector has actually seen the wider issue around allowing the sport to go ahead?
Thank you for the question. Yes, of course, in the last event held in 2019, Kaharoa School helped out and was able to fundraise a significant amount of money, which went very well. I haven't seen from the paperwork which has come through if they're involved this year or not, and I may suspect that could be due to them working with food in the current COVID guidelines, but I am happy to follow that up and come back to you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Madam
Yes.
Chair, there appears to be no more questions, so you may wish to ask for a mover and a seconder so the item can be discussed. We've got hands up from Councillor Tapsell and Councillor Wang. I'm just going to, are they additional questions?
Or moving and seconding?
Yeah, moving and seconding. So we've got a mover from Councillor Tapsell and seconded by Councillor Wang.
Thank you. So then I'll just open it up for some general discussion, and I'll come straight to you, Councillor McPherson.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, first thank you to Joshua for his report, the reviews by Reagan and Jeff Williams. Much appreciated. The additional information comes from a bit of a ring around yesterday. Winston Fleming, the objector, contacted me, and it's with reference to the top of page 16, where it's indicated that MBOP did deliver door-to-door leaflets and claims that the majority of residents are in support of the proposed event. I'm not sure that's still the case because the people that in the street that are adversely affected by the event include now Tim and Kylie Day, Tom and Ann Hale, Michael and Dorothy Young, and Phil and Barbara Tucker. The others, Scott Lloyd and his partner, John Rothman down the end of the road, and Alan and Michaela Patterson could not be contacted. So there's already a majority of people that are troubled by this event. Mr. Fleming himself could not actually collect signatures on a petition to formally present it because, of course, we're bound by COVID, but hopes to be able to do so next year if need be. And his continuing concern is that people continue to use these roads, Karoa and Penny Road, as a racetrack before and after the event. They can continue to practice, come up there to practice their rallying skills. And he once again asked the event to be moved to a dedicated rally sprint track at Taupo. So his request in these quite unique circumstances is that officials discuss this option with the event organisers with a review to resolving the matter either for this year or for next year. He's taking the long-term view. Thank you very much.
Thank you. That might be something that he may, what we've got before us is a recommendation for this year's event later this month, but that might be something that they may wish to take up with the organisers perhaps for next year. So some other comments or discussion? Your Worship, I see your hand raised.
Thank you. And I do wish to speak in support of this, and I agree with Mrs. Trumper. When I was involved in the event with the community, there was a big community turnout and they really enjoyed the event. And we had objectors then, and there always will be objectors. And the school benefited and did. It was lovely. We started at the school and it was a lovely rural community event. I take on board the comments that Councillor McPherson has made, but I have to say that in a discussion with the Regional Police Commissioner this week, he mentioned there were other racing that has always happened in rural communities. And we've always got it, we always will. And I remember Councillor Johnny Lepper always saying that we needed a track for these people, these young people that love petrol, and let's find them the right place. I have no objection to the event organisers considering Taupo, but not this year. This is an event that I believe the community, with good traffic management, with good police management and notification, will manage around. And I think the time is right for us to look positively at these events, especially as we come out of Delta Level 2. We need something to get out and about and enjoy in our community. And these are not hoon heads. These are people that just love rally, and I'm in total support of the event.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Our next speaker is Mrs. Trumper, followed by Councillor Kumar.
Thank you, Mrs. Trumper.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm going to speak in support of this. I am well aware that the Targa rally out here, it creates friction between those that feel that they are hindered by their movement around the area. I understand that there are also opportunities for our local rural schools and organisations to fundraise. And I'm well aware that most of these motorsport organisations go above and beyond to try and accommodate residents to be able to get in and out. They allow the mailmen to get through, they're escorted through, and the number of people that meet at a certain spot and they're asked to wait as the cars go through, and then they're taken through to their properties and they are managed absolutely perfectly. And I've got no hesitation that this particular event will be successful.
Thank you, Mrs. Trumper. Councillor Kumar.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Madam Chair, I will not be supporting this event in light of what the objector has said, and I believe on what also Councillor Reno McPherson has brought to light as well. I believe one has to live in that area and be totally opposed to it, because this is a farming and rural area that is not made and built for road racing, even be one day of the year. I think from my point of view, and the questions I asked earlier was, how many leaflets were dropped by Mbapop, and it was never answered. And the objector's experience speaks that there is them and a lot of people that are really frustrated. I mean, if they want to take a rally, they have to take it to a place where it suits them, where there are not people, where they're not farms, where they're not dust that'll be flying and into their houses and all, you know, and cars that come and practice. I mean, when people go and play a competition of golf over 4 days, they go 2-3 days before or 2 days before to practice. And in the same way, as it's been mentioned by Councillor McPherson, that when he spoke to a few people, they said that these cars come before and there'd be lots of them coming. And I think it will be a total nuisance. So yeah, in light of that, despite the fact that the community, the school could be making money off that, that's just an off spin. And I don't think that really is meant to be for an off spin. I do not at this stage support it, because I think there are lots of health and safety measures that have not been properly mitigated here.
Thank you, Councillor Kumar.
We have Councillor Maxwell to speak next.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Maxwell.
Thank you. I will be supporting this again, like I have in the past. It is a professional organisation who follow the rules, and also I'm very encouraged, and thank you, the rural chair, Shirley Trumper. You've given me confidence that the people out in the rural area, the majority are in support. I support. Kia ora.
Thank you very much.
And finally, we have Councillor Tapswell. Sorry, we do have a couple more hands that are jumping up. We've got Councillor Tapswell, followed by Councillor Bentley, and followed by Councillor Wang.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Sorry, I thought all the discussion was finished. I'll just say my part at the end to sum up as the mover.
Thank you. Councillor Bentley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just that I hope, for the sake of the locals, that the assurances given by the organisers that the road will be returned to at least the status it was prior to the event. And which means that obviously Fulton Hogan or somebody is going to have to go over it after the rallying is done to repair any damage to this road surface.
Thank you. I'm sure that would be in their plan. Regan, that would be correct, would it? Thank you. Councillor Wang.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd also like to speak in support of this event, and as a person who is from the Kaharoa area as well, if there are concerns, I would suggest that they could approach the police for enforcement. But I've seen this event many times. I've attended them as well. I attended Kaharoa School, and one thing I've noticed is that this event, aside from it being a fundraiser, it's a chance for the whole community, the wider rural community as well, to get together and celebrate this event. I acknowledge those concerns as well, but from the comments made by Motorsport Bay of Plenty, I'm really confident that they do have all those systems in place to mitigate any problems that could arise, like the public liability insurance and like the health and safety plans and their traffic management plans. And so with that, I'm really happy to support this event and let it go ahead. I think it brings a lot of people to Rotorua at a time where we really need it as well, suffering from the effects of the downturn in tourism and downturn in visitors from the COVID alert levels. And so, yeah, absolutely support this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wang. It's really very good to have your views on that, particularly as you live there in that area. Thank you. Councillor Tapsell for your concluding.
Madam Chair, there is a signal from Councillor McPherson. He has already spoken, but
yes, well, thank you. I'll take that, Councillor McPherson. Thank you.
Chair, I appreciate your indulgence. My position, because of what I picked up yesterday, was to abstain from this, but my deepening concern now is that confidence amongst the local people on these roads that are most affected, support for this rally is ebbing away, and we don't seem to have got into a problem-solving mindset as a council that the actual difficulties that we've got out there are going to be resolved this year or next year. And so that's suggested to me that it's time not to support this, and that's how I'll be voting. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Tapsell. Oh, sorry, that was it, yes.
That's right, yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to thank Councillor Wang and Mrs. Trumper for sharing their views as residents of rural areas. And it's wonderful to hear from Councillor Wang just how connected that community is and how beneficial it has been for connecting others to that area as well. But I do just need to correct some fake news. Motorsport Bay of Plenty is clearly outlined within report have an approved traffic management plan and health and safety plans, and Councillor Wang touched on that. And you know, there's a lot of detail and work that needs to go into that. So there is actually no problem with them holding this event. They have given us every confidence that any issue can be resolved, and they have also given the residents confidence with that. So there's also the opportunity for those that may have concerns that live down that street to still contact Motorsport Bay of Plenty. They've obviously been very open with working alongside any issues that may come up from the residents. And thank you, Councillor Wang, for reiterating that they do have public liability insurance for up to $10 million. That's hugely significant. I don't know many events that go that far to ensure that no matter what, worst case scenario, the public and the ratepayers won't be any worse off for this event. And in fact, I'm really looking forward to what will be an exciting and fun event. And I'm very happy to be supporting this and will be voting in favour. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you, Councillor Tapsell. Thank you, your worship councillors, for the discussion this morning on this topic. So we have had a mover and a seconder. So I propose that I'll put this motion that the committee recommends to council to approve or decline the temporary closure of Kaharoa and Penny Roads for the event. So to approve, this is how I'll do that. Is that correct, Una?
That's right, yes. So to approve, and if everybody could use their raise hand icon.
Thank you. So all those to approve, thank you. There's mine.
Okay, and that is carried to approve that.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So was there, I know,
no, that's it.
Thank you.
Just reset some of the hands.
Thank you very much. So we move on to our agenda item.
Division.
A division, certainly. So if you can just, division has been called for, Una. So that would be those who decline. Can you raise your hand? Use the raise your hand, please. Those who are declining. Thank you. Thank you. You've got those, Una.
I just need to clarify what Councillor Maxwell is doing.
Well, sorry.
You're not against it, are you?
No, just that, sorry, Chair mentioned about declining, and I thought, no, I'm not declining this.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I have Councillor McPherson and Councillor Kumar as against. Everybody else was for.
Yeah.
Thank you. So we'll go to now to item 6.2 on our agenda, which is on page 24. Yes, page 24. I'd just like to have a mover and a seconder, please, that the report Infrastructure Acceleration Fund expression of interest for information be received. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please?
Mover is Councillor Donaldson, seconded by Mayor Chadwick.
Thank you. I'll put that now. I'll put that motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Oh, raise your hand.
Raise
sorry.
hand.
Raise your hand.
It's carried.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Oh, here we are now. Sorry, I'll just get this in order. Thank you. Now, JP, you were going to overview our report, this report, with a presentation. I think the presentation, JP, is quite comprehensive. Where's JP on my screen?
Good morning, everyone, and morning, Madam Chair. Yes, thank you for that. I do have quite an extensive presentation. Really, the intent here is to make sure we properly contextualise the Infrastructure Acceleration Fund. So why are we applying for $113 million for stormwater infrastructure? So I thought it was very important for us just to make sure we gave a good overview of the context for this as we talk to our community more widely about developments in the city. So, Madam Chair, if it's all right, I'll just try and share my screen of that presentation now.
So this information that you're sharing with us this morning, is that correct? It's all information?
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you very much. All right then. So thank you. Yes. And I'm happy that, I mean, I know it's very comprehensive. It's a subject that's dear to everybody. So obviously you've got quite a considerable amount of information to share. So I will allow quite considerable, I'll make sure that we have the time. Just take the time that you need for this, please, JP.
All right. Thank you, Madam Chair. Una, am I sharing the right screen where you can just see the single slide, or are you seeing two slides?
No, I'm seeing the next slide as well. So maybe if you don't go into, just leave it in the PowerPoint rather than the presentation style, maybe.
Let me just have a swap around of my screen. So I'll just move one.
Yeah,
to the other.
if you leave it like that, JP. Oh.
Is that?
No.
Okay.
No.
Oops, okay.
If you just leave it in PowerPoint and don't actually click on to the slide show, might work.
So can you see it now?
No, we're just seeing your desktop.
Okay, let me just move that back across then. How about that?
Yeah, leave it like that.
Okay.
Can I just check? Can I just check, please, Una? Can you just check that councillors that we've all got that up on our screens. Is everybody receiving that? Maybe you can't hear me. JP, I just want to make sure, Una, that everybody can see they've got that up on these screens.
Yeah, there are a number of hands that have gone up.
That's good.
Yeah, and just while we're in the presentation, if we can just keep hands down and go through the presentation, because in a presentation style or a sharing screen style, we can only see a limited number of attendees tiles. Thank you.
So you want hands down?
Yes, please.
Thank you. Thank you, JP. Sorry about that. Kia ora.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, just before I start, there was that discussion about how we've worked through another level 4 lockdown. And from a housing perspective, I just wondered if it was worth just reflecting on how things happened the first time we moved into a lockdown. So if we cast our minds right back, there was a real sense of urgency and a rush to address some serious challenges for our community as we went into that very first lockdown. So we had a number of homeless people who were still living in cars and living in our parks, and also populating a shelter in the inner city. And obviously, as we were looking at the implications around COVID, it was really important for them to be housed safely. So there was that rush to get the homeless into motels to provide some safe and secure accommodation. So obviously since then that's continued. And then of course, since that process, we've also done some work with government about making sure the families and children that are in emergency housing and motels are also in the best possible accommodation, providing wraparound services and appropriate safety as well. So the government's moving into that phase of contracting some of those motels, 12, to provide that whānau support and children's support until we can get enough public homes built. So, so that's a significant change from last time we went into a very serious level 4 lockdown. So, councillors, just in this presentation, and you'll see I've headed it up, the future of Rotorua. It's not just about infrastructure here. We're starting to really start thinking about the shape of our city, the shape of our communities, and the kinds of homes we need to provide for our people here. So on this front slide, I've just got some examples of newer type developments, private newer type developments that have been undertaken in other cities, so Auckland, Hamilton, and Tauranga. And then just for comparison, there's an example of ours in the bottom right-hand corner, which isn't too far from the council building. So we do have sort of medium to higher density housing in very small pockets, but what we're seeing is across the country is a lot more developments of that type. So really from this presentation, councillors, I wanted to just take you through sort of some of the national issues and the local responses, talk about the why, and as a consequence, talk about what are we doing around accelerating housing in that development pipeline, and where does this infrastructure acceleration fund application fit? And then I'll just give you a little bit more information about next steps and answer off any questions. So councillors, you're all aware that we're not the only place in New Zealand that has some serious challenges around housing and a shortage of housing, nor are we the only place in New Zealand that does not have kāinga ora working extremely hard to try and provide significant increases in public housing. So on this slide, I've just put some examples of some of the responses we're seeing in other parts of the country. So on your left-hand side of the screen there is developments that are underway in Marlborough. So 108 homes being built by kāinga ora there as part of Nelson City Council's inner city strategy of bringing more people into their CBD. They've sold 2 major sites to kāinga ora to develop some multi-storey apartment social housing within the city. So that's an option that Nelson's proceeded with. There's also no shortage of controversy for Kāinga Ora as well. So the last slide I have there, or picture on the right-hand side, was a development in Flagstaff where a community petition objected to Kāinga Ora developing a site for approximately 60 two-storey homes. So whilst all areas have problems with people in emergency housing, there was also community backlash about Kāinga Ora developing additional public housing in locations. So councillors, this is a really important context slide for this presentation and obviously where we're going on a lot of development. So I'll just walk through this slide because it is very, very important for us as to where we've been, where we're going, and why we're doing so much work in the housing space. So if you look at the little pyramids, or sorry, little skyscrapers along the bottom of this graph, it goes right back to 1996. So you can see there, it tracks the district's population, which is very, very gradually increased from about 67,000 to probably about 68,000 in 2012. So we had a very flat and limited growth or no growth across the district for an extended period. If we actually went back before 1996, we would have seen a similar sort of set of bars there, very much keeping the population at a flat line. So what I've indicated there too is the 2 points when the council started reviewing and redeveloping its district plan. So it started off in 2006 and the district plan was completed in 2012. Obviously there's various hearings and appeals before it became operative in about 2015. But that district plan was developed in a context of zero to minor growth. So the actual amount of land that was zoned or identified for future growth was extremely limited. And in addition to that, the rules about intensification or higher density were not changed during that period. So we actually have a district plan that was really written for a zero growth scenario. So really since that plan was completed from about 2013 onward, you can start to see our significant growth that took place between 2013 right through to today. Now, that increase in growth is significant, and on that basis, Rotorua Lakes Council's urban area was identified as a medium growth or a tier 2 council area under the National Policy Statement on Urban Development. Now, as a consequence of being identified as a medium growth or a tier 2 council, under that National Policy Statement, we are required to plan effectively for growth and make available and make serviced land to address our housing requirements. So what you can see on that graph there, and I've circled it in red, is our current projections for population increases. So one of them is from Infometrics, and that work was undertaken in 2020. Now that was the population data that was used to underpin the long-term plan, but also was used to guide our planning around the 30-year infrastructure strategy. Just by way of comparison there, a more conservative approach is applied by Stats New Zealand. So their 2021 projections there are shown as the yellow line. So we're continuing to see growth right out to at least 2040. So I've indicated across just the first 10 years and also looked backwards. So in the 10 years from about 2011 to 2021, we built approximately 1,100 homes in the district. Again, that was a reflection of probably the limited development capacity and our growth really taking off before the planning and development started to pick up. So really that's put the pressure on us to put in place far more homes over the next 10 years, so hence the 6,000, to meet that demand. So for a number of people, they take the view of saying, well, let's just not grow, let's not do this. Actually, we don't have an option, and we're required to plan and make available land, make available opportunities for housing in our community. So it's a critical set of decisions that we must take. So what have we been doing? So back in 2017 and 2018, we did a significant amount of work on a spatial plan. Now, this was a challenging set of conversations across our community because it really started to say we need to identify where growth should occur. And for many communities or people who want things to stay the same, that was a very challenging set of conversations. So what I've identified here is just the high level objectives that we set from that spatial plan that we adopted in 2018. And on the right-hand side, I've just identified some of the consultation that was undertaken. So if you recall, we put out a discussion document, and then after that, we also put out a draft spatial plan for consultation. We did a huge amount of work, and a lot of it was face-to-face. So you can see there 56 workshops. The vast majority of those were with iwi and either at marae level or at the entity level, so talking directly to entities about their aspirations for development. So a significant amount of consultation went into the development of the spatial plan, which sets our direction and has been sort of the blueprint for a lot of the work you'll start seeing coming forward around plan changes, particularly around intensification and greenfield development, but also underpinned the Infrastructure Acceleration Fund application. So councillors, this next slide just picks up on a couple of those objectives and just summarises pictorially what was identified in that spatial plan. So part of that was obviously in a vibrant city heart, or in a city, was the development of the green spaces and the reserves around our CBD, which adds significantly to its amenity. Some objectives there about, or actions to say, look, we really need to change the footprint of our CBD and introduce more accommodation and inner city living. So for those councillors who have been here a while, that's no significant change, and we just continue to try and encourage that inner city living as an option. Also cited in there was the changing out, therefore, of Fenton Street. So really, Fenton Street, there's a large number of motels, which obviously can continue, but also taking the opportunity as a significant transport corridor to allow higher density apartment style or higher density housing to occur also on Fenton Street as an alternative to motels. So again, looking to bring high density housing and accommodation and apartment style living to the city, but also along that key corridor of Fenton Street. The last one there on objective 3 related to our environment and our key playgrounds. So I've got a slide later on which will talk a bit more about our green-blue corridors. So those recreation reserves that create a sort of a green corridor, but equally those reserves are critical for stormwater and streams running down through to the lake, so draining the city effectively as well. So, so key sort of objectives were identified in that spatial plan and form the basis of the Infrastructure Acceleration Fund application and some of our current thinking as far as development is concerned. So councillors here, again, picking up on those 6,000 homes. So we've got some projections here, and I'll just move my cursor across it. So up to about this line here is the need around our 6,000 homes across the next 10 years. One of the things that Infometrics identified is the need for, in our communities, to see a significant increase in the availability of public housing. So that's through Kāinga Ora, or through community housing providers, iwi, or any other sort of providers like council, for example, to provide some more affordable rentals or publicly orientated, or socially orientated housing. One of the other things that we need to do as far as the national policy statement on urban development is to make sure that we have an adequate supply of zoned land and infrastructurally enabled land. So I talked in that initial slide about how our district plan was written at a time when we had close to zero growth. So if we map what we see as probably the available land now that is serviced and can be usefully accessed, you end up with this dotted line running across the graph. So what that really highlights is that as we start addressing our housing requirements, we are going to run out of zoned or available land for residential development very quickly, so out by about 2025. So that really means that we need to embark on some plan changes to make available more land, so more greenfield land, make sure it's serviced, or change the rules around how we use the current land within our urban footprint. So that means enabling more infill or more redevelopment through intensification. So I've just drawn this blue blob on our graph. So this is where we need to make sure that we're creating this additional capacity to ensure that we can keep supplying homes in our community. So that's going to be the driver of a number of plan changes we need to do to meet our national policy statement on urban development requirements, but also to make sure we have sufficient land for the homes we need for our community. So a really critical lead-in for us. So part of that is really to make sure that we have the infrastructural enablement to ensure that if we make this land available through rules or through zoning, it can be taken up and it can be developed for housing. So councillors, that just gets a bit more granular as to those housing projections. So it sort of comes down there. So this again was supplied by Infometrics and identifies the number of homes we need to put in place each year. Now, we're actually starting from a deficit position. So a lot of the information I've got on this presentation has been supplied by the Ministry of Housing and Urban Development. So you can see on the graph, I've just termed this HUD. So when they did a place-based assessment for us a year or so ago, they identified that they thought we had a shortfall in homes currently of approximately 1,750. So whilst we're starting to say, look, we need to have homes moving forward to meet our housing supply and our growing population and our changing population, we're actually starting from a deficit position. So really, really important that we move quite quickly to ensure homes are available for people moving forward. Some of the other information we've got from our Infometrics work, and it's also reflected nationally and again corroborated by the Ministry of Housing and Urban Development, is this need to make sure that we see a change in house types moving forward. So across the next 10 years, 2/3 of household growth will need to be in smaller homes. So that's 1-bedroom and 2-bedroom homes, which really reflect the changing nature of our families, a lot more sole parents with 1 or 2 children, but also an aging population or more couples or singles. So we need to actually build more smaller homes or of different types rather than just focusing on larger family size homes, 3, 4, 5 bedrooms on large pieces of land, as we currently see for much of our suburban area. So those family size homes are important, but actually the demand moving forward is actually to go to smaller homes. So how do we enable that and how do we support that? Also, those smaller homes on smaller footprints also make them more affordable, which is another huge challenge for communities. Which actually comes to that affordability question. So councillors, this is a complicated diagram, but I'll just try and step you through it because it just highlights some of the challenges for people who rent in our community. So the blue lines across the bottom, councillors, just show the distribution of incomes by renters. So the numbers and obviously the income distribution. So you can see it also tracks the change between 2013 and 2020. So the dotted line is 2013, and the solid line is the current income distribution of renters in our community as at 2020. So there's been very little change in that income curve if you look across. But what is changed significantly is the rents being charged for those homes in our community. So back in 2013, this was the distribution curve of rents across our renting available homes for rent. And now it looks like this. So it's been drawn to a much higher renting level and a much wider distribution. So what I've done there is I've just done a blue line there, which is on a family income of approximately 50,000. And just a note on the side there. So rent is considered affordable when it is less than 30% of a household's income. So that's the benchmark of affordability. So back in 2013, you can see there was the peak. A household that earned $50,000 could have found affordable rentals in 2,500 properties within Rotorua. Fast forward to 2020, and that same family or household earning $50,000, affordable rentals available to them, which met that affordability criteria, would have only numbered 300. So obviously, if people earn less than 50,000 as a household income, the number of available properties decreases significantly. So that puts a huge amount of pressure on families and individuals to find rental accommodation, and has also contributed to some of the challenges we've now got with people needing emergency housing. So councillors are just tracking this, and this is quite a good little page to show you some of those impacts. So since 2013, our population has increased by 12.9%, so a significant amount. Median rents, so it goes back to that rental table I just showed you before, have increased by 84%. So moved up from about $210 to $460 on as a median point. House prices have also significantly increased from $320 in 2013 to $585. So a significant movement. And even on this data, it's moved significantly more as well. I think we're in excess of 600,000 now. So as a consequence, councillors, we've seen this huge increase in the number of people on the public housing register. So that's that centre bottom statistic there, I'm just touching on there. So since 2015, it's increased by 718 to over 741. So again, this was a snapshot in time, but it just shows you that dramatic shift. And equally, 614 households have used the emergency housing special needs grant. The last piece there, councillors, and it goes to some of the stereotyping of who needs emergency housing. And one of the looming issues I think we have as a community and as a country is the number of superannuitants who are renting. So there's a current cohort that are renting, and as more people approach retirement age, we'll see far more people going into their retirement renting. So currently, and this is again based on Ministry of Housing and Urban Development figures, they currently see 650 superannuitant households, so that may be a single or a couple, who are receiving the accommodation supplement, who are paying above that 30% of their income. So it is unaffordable housing. So we may see progressively an increasing number of older people needing to be housed and cared for through emergency housing as their rentals become unaffordable as well. So a significant and continuing to emerge problem for our community. So if I just summarise what we need here, councillors, and one of the things that we've identified and put out there in our long-term plan is we need 6,000 homes by 2031. So, and really we need to make as much of an impact as possible, as early as possible, because of that deficit. So 3,000 homes is the target by 2026. Also, in reflecting back on the housing types and the changing composition of households, we need 2/3 of those homes to be of a smaller size or type. So that's really important, because that is a big shift. Currently, and probably over the last 2 or 3 years, we're tracking somewhere between 20 to 30% of those homes are in that smaller household type. So we've still got a long way to go to make sure that we're actually meeting what's required. Public housing, we've got approximately 900 across Rotorua Council and other community housing providers and social providers in our community. But as I stated before, because of the income levels and deprivation levels of our community, we have quite a low ratio of public housing. So we need a significant increase in the available public housing to address the challenges we currently have with those people being housed in motels, but equally as our population changes, and I'll again make that comment about those superannuitants who are in unaffordable housing at the moment. So as I've mentioned before, we're required to make sure that we have enough adequately zoned and infrastructure enabled land or rules to make available spaces for our housing now, but across into the next decade. So critically important. So again, this Housing Infrastructure Acceleration Fund is critical to make sure that infrastructure enablement is there. If we go to smaller housing types and provide some different housing types, there's also a need to keep the focus on making sure there's more affordable options. Now, whether that's a first home buyer or someone just looking to change from a family home to a smaller home, or to ensure that there can be more affordable rentals out there in the marketplace. The last piece, and this is really about the development of our city and our district at a higher level, is we need to strike that balance between greenfield development and intensification, redevelopment and infill. It's far more expensive to move to a greenfield development situation. So again, that pushes up prices. It's far cheaper to redevelop and infill within currently serviced community or area. Also, there's a wide range of additional benefits about intensification. It supports public transport, you get better use of facilities and assets, less use of cars and vehicles, and more walkable communities. So what I've said there, and it's something that was cited within the spatial plan, is we need to strike that balance. At the very least, we have to see something like 50-50 moving forward in the way of greenfield versus development within the current urban footprint. We also have to provide those options to support inner city living and vibrancy, and also support our suburban centres as well, as they become more and more critical to thriving communities, and obviously the redevelopment and regeneration in some of those communities as well. Now, all of this has to be underpinned by better environmental and climate resilient infrastructure. Expectations around quality of our environment, but also our ability to address and mitigate some of the impacts of climate change are also going to be critical for us across the next 10 years as well. So, councillors, we've talked about the number of interventions that are required, and there is no single intervention or no single solution. We need to look at everything possible to support housing development and making sure that we've got homes for our current population, and certainly thinking about that growing population moving forward. So some of those solutions that we've talked about previously is what do we need to do about the inner city, and we're taking a lead and using Rotorua Economic Development to explore apartment developments in the inner city. We also have to work really closely with the market to ensure and support feasible housing development. We need to have good consenting processes, and actually where things aren't feasible but we still need different homes of different types, maybe we need to start looking at the incentives or ensuring that infrastructure is front loaded so that development can occur. Without question, we need to partner with government. So Rotorua housing and urban development are critical to making sure that we have sufficient social and public housing available, but we also need to work closely with iwi and our wider community and philanthropics, trusts and other community groups to make sure we've got housing and the support for developments of homes in our communities. We've talked a lot about the importance for us of locality planning. So obviously we have the East Side Wellness Plan, but equally they're really important for that communication and support from local communities while we see redevelopment and intensification, and an ability to really plan to make sure those communities are thriving, they're safe, they're good, and that they can effectively accommodate more housing development. And obviously from a planning perspective, and I've talked about this a couple of times, we need to embark on a number of plan changes to make sure there is sufficient and appropriately zoned land for the future, but also that we have rules that enable us to see infill and intensification across the city. So we make the best of our current urban footprint, which is obviously heavily constrained, and make sure that we get that balance between greenfield and intensification and redevelopment. Clearly, we're not in a situation like Tauranga where they can simply roll out greenfield subdivisions. We live in a caldera, and it creates some really challenges for us in how big and where the city can grow and expand. Also on that line, we just need to make sure we've got very clear guidance and responsive regulatory processes to support the market or government to invest in development. And clearly, infrastructure investment is critical, and what the Infrastructure Acceleration Fund in this application may provide to a significant degree is certainty, because that's one of the biggest challenges for development, is the certainty of costs or supply of critical services. So just coming now to talk about the Infrastructure Acceleration Fund. So councillors, the report details what the focus has been of our Acceleration Fund application, and critically, our key threads that I just highlight is we are in a housing crisis. We've got a significant number of people who are being accommodated and will be accommodated for a period within some contracted motels because there's insufficient public housing. We have been slow to see greenfield residential development take off, and also we have a lack of zoned land for the future or medium term, so we need to address that. So our long-term plan and our 30-year infrastructure strategy highlights that we've got significant priorities for infrastructural development. So mainly they are on the wastewater treatment plant and addressing the current spray irrigation in the forest. So we need to address the wastewater treatment plant. Equally, there's sufficient funding to address water supply requirements as needed, but stormwater is our biggest challenge, and it's very difficult to put in place stormwater infrastructure on a piecemeal basis that follows development. So it is the most significant challenge. And obviously, as a council, we, and like many others, we're suffering the legacy of underinvestment and a service level that does not appropriately address climate resilience and climate change. And equally, there's been changing legislation and requirements about environmental standards, but we also as a community have some very high expectations of water quality and the quality of our environment, driven significantly by Te Arawa. So really important for the values of this community. So this application really looks at trying to pick up almost 30 years worth of stormwater infrastructure investment and bring it forward within a time horizon of approximately 7 years. That gives us a huge amount of flexibility to make sure that as we progress plan changes and provide that opportunity for intensification and redevelopment and infill, there will be sufficient capacity to manage stormwater. And that way we ensure that there is affordability for our community and developers to progress that. So this application was based on some modelled capacity. So at this stage, we've done our best to estimate what could be undertaken. There is some greenfields included within that application. And where possible, we've also tried to talk to developers or landowners about their aspirations. So we've got some clarity about the future timing and likelihood of development. So councillors, I know I've presented this high-level map to you at least twice, and I know Stavros has also used this to highlight some investment that's currently underway in Linton Park. So just broadly here, our Infrastructure Acceleration Fund application has been based on broadly a catchment of the western side of the city, the central area, and the eastern side. So if I just talk about the reasoning, and it again will become one of those areas of discussion. The western side, we have greenfields development occurring up above Pukehangi Road, and so stormwater from that new area will need to be accommodated. However, modelling by the Bay of Plenty Regional Council, anticipating the impacts of climate change, which really result in more frequent storm events and higher levels of rain. So higher levels of rain and a higher frequency mean that we will see significant increases in the frequency and the severity of flooding in the lower Utahina. So without any intensification, just the impact of climate change will have a dramatic increase in the flood risk posed at the lower end of the Utahina stream. So what needs to be undertaken in the western side is obviously we need to create some ways of avoiding as much as possible the severity and the frequency of flooding of private property, so homes or industrial or commercial land that below State Highway 5 or around State Highway 5 down to the mouth of the Utahina. And the only way for us to do that is to spill and detain water onto our green space. So if we want to avoid flooding of private properties, commercial and residential, then we have to send the water somewhere during severe weather events. And the only place we can send it is into the green stuff. So one of the things that Stavros's team is modelling is how we can use our reserves as areas to spill and flood as an alternative to flooding private properties. So if you look back up through that diagram I've shown you there, you can see there's some work underway currently in Linton Park, which is being funded by DIA funding to ensure that those areas can be some way flooded to avoid flooding further down the Mangakakihi stream, and we need to look at the options up through the Utahina as well to try and reduce that. So two reasons there. So if we can achieve that, then we can reduce the flood risk at the lower ends of the Utahina, but also we've enabled intensification and greenfield developments on the western side. Supporting that, you can see I've got some cross arrows heading east in the central zone. So one of the options there to also reduce some of the pressure on the Utahina and the flood risk is to divert stormwater from the east of the Utahina and east of State Highway 5 towards the Puringa or more directly out into Lake Rotorua. So that way we just reduce that flooding load onto the Utahina stream. And also that creates some capacity within that central area for further intensification and infill. The story on the eastern side is different again, which is we've received the Crown Infrastructure Partnership funding, which was intended to provide some stormwater management and roading improvements to enable us to ensure the Wharanui development could occur. but we still need to make sure we've got some improvements in our stormwater infrastructure, which carries water down across the lower side or the western side of Tenai Road to the lake. Probably the last comment I would make, councillors, is if we can improve the detention and retention and flooding of those green spaces to reduce the chance and the frequency and severity of flooding on the lower end of the Utahina, we also start improving some of the environmental outcomes. Where there's flooding that occurs, and sometimes it floods into the industrial areas around State Highway 5, it's also severe weather events are an unfortunate time when we carry a lot of contaminants and pollution and debris down into the lake as well. So that's a real problem down through that lower part of the Utahina as well. So whilst we can divert or spill stormwater, it also prevents us taking nasties down the Utahina and into the lake as well. So as I said, councillors, currently Stavros and his engineering team are looking at some sort of treatments in Linton Park. We now need to look at some more systems up through that western side to help us reduce that frequency and severity of flooding on the Utahina. So again, councillors, this is summarised in the report, the three funding blocks there that make up the 113 million. And I've talked about those 4 stormwater detention areas in that blue-green corridor I've talked about, down through the Mangakākihī and Utahina streams, the partial funding there by the Department of Internal Affairs, and the potential yield from greenfield infill and intensification. Obviously, you would have read the other parts, so I won't dwell too much on that slide, councillors. So finally, councillors, it's been a lot of context, but the Infrastructure Acceleration Fund, coupled with improvements in wastewater, coupled with water supply, mean that we will have those critical services to support growth moving forward. So this slide was just trying to bring those aspects together. So what does success look like in a housing perspective for us over the next 10 years? I've talked about our urban footprint. We've made better use of our current urban area, and we've seen good redevelopment, comprehensive infill, intensification, which supports a more walkable city, supports public transport, which supports alternative transport modes, and making use of those green corridors. We've added some vibrancy and support back into our inner city because we've seen multi-level residential move in there and different accommodation developed. So critical alternatives in that smaller house size and units. I've talked about locality planning. So we'll have a focus there on making sure we've got safe, successful urban centres that are useful and walkable for communities in those areas. And around them, hopefully we'll see more units of smaller sizes to meet what our community needs. So that means townhouses, duplexes, flats, apartments, or just smaller homes on smaller pieces of land that for us become more affordable to first home buyers or retirees or people wanting to change where they live or where they rent. One of the important things we also have to be conscious of is the ability for us, like other centres, to develop mixed communities. So certainly Kāinga Ora's view is they do not want to simply build social housing or public housing in a single location. They want to see a mix of affordable, first home buyers and market responses in areas. So all mixed in together, which provide far better and far more successful, safer communities. And then I've briefly spoken previously, councillors, about the need to make sure we get better environmental outcomes and are addressing climate resilience for this community and dealing with our underinvestment over many decades in some of that core infrastructure. So last slide, councillors, so thank you for your patience. So our next steps is our Infrastructure Acceleration Fund expression of interest has been submitted. This will be assessed over the next month, so we should hear an answer sometime in October about whether we will be invited in part or in full to submit a more detailed business case with decisions on funding coming late this year or into early 2022. I've also talked about the wider framework that we need to work on. So planning pathways. So we need to start looking at, have we got enough land zoned, and how do we support that intensification and redevelopment? So critical to that will be a significant amount of engagement, probably even more significant than what we put forward through the spatial plan, to make sure people understand what could be happening on the street, what does good infill look like, what does medium density housing look like, and how do we provide effectively for our community. Certainly with any infrastructure that gets built, and certainly as we move forward into thinking about plan changes, we need to really work with iwi and consider how we engage and what support we need to put in place there, because there is a significant draw on their time and effort to engage in what will be some quite significant change processes as we try and develop our city for the future. So councillors, I'll just stop sharing there, and I'm happy to answer off any questions.
Thank you. And Una, I presume you can hear me? JP, can you hear me?
Yes, I certainly can.
Fine, thank you. Look, then I presume everybody else can as well. I hope they can. But look, thank you very much for putting everything into context, JP. And I'm pleased that you did, because it really just clarifies for us the thinking that went into the fund applications that have been submitted. So thank you for that. Look, the other thing also that councillors, JP, should be aware of, for many of us over the last 5 to 6 years, we have seen this coming together with all the pieces of work that have been undertaken. And I know that perhaps for some councillors, some of this might be new, but from the time of the spatial plan, you know, we have been seeing all of this work being pulled together, the strands being pulled together, and it's been extremely comprehensive, as you've just laid out in all the information that we've received this morning. The other thing also, just want to make one other point before we open it up for questions, JP, is that this has obviously very, very big implications for the services that are provided within our community, and they will change over a period of time, and for the workforce as well. So this is a big piece of work that we're looking at here. It's not just on the housing, it's everything else that goes into planning for the future development of our city. So it's actually quite exciting. But we have seen this coming together over the last 5 or 6 years with the different pieces of work that have come before us. So I am going to, I know there's a lot of information, JP, that you've provided for us. Thank you very much indeed for that. So I'm going to open it up for any questions that we might have at this point. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We do have a number of questions. We've first got questions from Mr. Thomas, followed by Mr. Biasani Tule, and followed by Councillor McPherson.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Thomas.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through you, JP, great report, and fantastic to see that we've put in an expression of interest for this fund, and you know, great seeing council working with government on these issues in general. Look, I just had a couple of questions, and one was around some of your preamble before the details about the fund itself. And on the page 9 of your presentation, you had that diagram of percentages of smaller homes, basically, you know, couples, single person homes, families and stuff like that. And I just wondered where that data was pulled from. Was that Rotorua-based data or national data? And I guess my point is, I hope it was Rotorua-based data, or that we're taking account of, we have most probably a higher proportion of large families in Rotorua. I know out in my rural area we do. And actually, larger families have struggled to find housing for not just the last couple of years, for ages. And we have a lot of 3-bedroom homes with families of 6 or 7 or 8 people in them, which is automatically creating stress and difficulties for them. So I do hope that when we look at that and the makeup of homes being built, we are pulling from Rotorua data. That was my first question.
Just answering that off then, Mr. Thomas. Yes, it is Rotorua data. So it's looked at the composition of our current housing, and Infometrics made the forward projections. As I indicated, we've tried our best actually to do some backward looking on the number of homes of different sizes that have been constructed over the last 10 years. And this is a requirement under the National Policy Statement for our monitoring moving forward, that we report on the sizes of homes being built and are they meeting our needs going forward. So yes, it's Rotorua data. Yes, we've looked back at composition and what's been built to date, and we certainly need to keep monitoring it going forward.
Yeah, thank you for that. And my second question was just around the fund itself and the criteria of it. I'm presuming and hoping that the application doesn't specify that they have to be new homes built for sale, that it also covers houses for rental, all sorts of things. And one thing that I think we need to be looking at here in Rotorua in this way is leasehold properties, which will work with iwi and actually really reduces the cost of purchase to the home purchaser, and it is one way of making houses a lot more affordable to people. And you only need to look out in the lakes areas where we have leasehold land next door to freehold land, and you can see those differences in prices and costs. So I assume that it covers all types of properties, not just houses for sale.
Yes, that's correct. And it's certainly an area that the Ministry of Housing and Urban Development is really concerned about. As house prices continue to increase, there's certainly a lot of analysis going on about how do you get homes back into that affordable range based on incomes, particularly and then that informs Kiwi builds. But as you say, we have a huge opportunity here to make sure there is a model for leasehold, which really does put us in an affordable space.
Yeah, great. Thank you for that. And once again, great work and congratulations on Jackie for putting the report together as well.
Thank you. Look, I'm going to take your worship. I had your hand up. I was on my side, so I'll take your one before I move on. So your worship.
Yes, just a question. I would like to speak at the end of all of this because I think this is quite magical that it's come together. And thanks for the presentation. My question, JP, is what suddenly happened that turned a housing challenge, because we knew we had a shortage of houses, into this housing crisis? We sort of had in our head that we needed 1,700 new homes, and now we're hearing, and we have heard at workshops, but it's become very apparent that it's crystallised out to needing 6,000. What was that tipping? Was it the place-based assessment, or was it the work that you did to put this acceleration fund together?
Your worship, I think it does go back to the place-based assessment. Often it's really hard to see the information that is out there. So I think we've always had, and it goes back to our issues around homelessness. So we started to see that progressive worsening of situations, more homeless people, more people choosing to live in cars. There was always a view, and the DHB was often quite vocal about saying we had significant overcrowding in homes in our district. So we've had this hidden problem. And I think one of the changes that's happened is the availability of emergency housing or just economics has driven more and more people into a situation where they can't keep staying with family and friends or overpopulating a home or living in a garage, and they've ended up coming to emergency housing. So the place-based assessment was a really effective way, and we appreciate the partnership with government on helping us clarify the scale of the problem. and I think that's been critical. I think the other piece which is contributed to the clarity is the last census. So we started to see the information from 2013 compared to the 2018 census, and started to see again the impact of inward migration to our city. And actually the higher proportion of Māori that are coming into our city during that time. So we've now ended up with a population that's 40.1% Māori. So that's a significant change. And it's been in that 13 to 18 period that we saw a higher proportion of Māori, probably Te Arawa, coming home. Now, so that's been incredibly important for the district, and it's part of our growth.
Thank you.
Thank you, JP. Mr. Bisini Tule.
Kia ora, Madam Chair, and thank you, JP. I really appreciate all the updates that you've been keeping us informed on, and especially the comments you made just about Te Arawa, Māori returning back to Rotorua. And I have a quick question. It's around what you just said, 4,000 of the 6,000 people who return are Māori. So are Papa Kāinga a part of these plans?
Yeah, they have to be. And again, one of the things that we've got in our district plan is some definition problems. One of the things, the only definition we have in a district plan is Papa Kāinga must be next to a marae, when actually that's not a definition that Te Arawa wants to use. So we've got some work in that space. But again, it comes to the question about leasehold and housing developments. Now, it's a really special opportunity for us, and I think there is no silver bullet, and this is a partnership with Te Arawa, with the community, with government, if we're to see sufficient homes built for our population.
Thank you. Una, I've got...
That's right. So we have Councillor McPherson next, followed by Mr. Berryman Camp, followed by Councillor...
So, sorry, what was the last one? Una, you're frozen. Oh, well, we'll just tell you you're frozen on the screen. Oh, there you are, Una. Sorry, I didn't get the last one.
Sorry, it was Councillor Kumar.
Kumar, thank you. Councillor McPherson.
Thank you, Chair. Through you, also my thanks, JP. This is an excellent presentation. And my first is just a question of availability for careful analysis. I'd love to read it at my own pace. When and where will it be available for reading by the public?
Can I just ask the question of what, Councillor? What will be available for the public to read?
Your presentation.
Oh, it's certainly, I'll put it out to Una to put within the minutes, or we can post it on the website or make it available for people. So I think it is, if we can use it and give that information out to communities, it's really valuable. So yes, thank you, Councillor.
Wonderful, wonderful. Next question concerns the population growth projections. In recent times, Professor Paul Spoonley has started to argue on a database that the growth figures across regions in New Zealand might have to be recalculated much more modestly. Are you aware of that work, and can that be used to possibly adjust these projections?
Councillor, there's a couple of threads to that. He's right in saying there's a question about what's happening in New Zealand as far as growth projections are concerned. Look, we can only rely on the professionals we have engaged. So we've engaged Infometrics, who do a significant amount of work on this kind of, I suppose, data management as well. So that's really important. And also, we also got an eye to what Statistics New Zealand is also putting forward. One of the interesting aspects, and I think the question raised earlier about migration of Te Arawa, it actually highlights a deficiency in some of the modelling that is undertaken across the country. There's this global view that there is just an age profile and a population to be moved from A to B or to age, but actually it probably fails to really model appropriately what happens differently within different communities. So this conversation about Te Arawa migration back to the rohi is actually an impact that's been seen in other centres as well, which almost runs contrary to some of the modelling that's being undertaken. And I would highlight again, when people start applying it too broadly, and this was one of our deficiencies we saw with the Nydia work probably about 5 or 6 years ago, which had us on a significant decline. So I think the best things we can do, Councillor, is to make sure that we regularly relook at the information and the projections, and also regularly try and get underneath the data to say what is happening here and why is it happening here. So I suppose the classic example is if you look at that original graph of mine when I showed you Stats New Zealand's projections of our population from 2015, 2017 and then 2021, you could see us going from a significant decline to a steady state, and then based on the last 5 or 6 years to actually a growth right out till 2040. So I think the best way of making sure you're always accurate is to always recheck and reproject.
Fine, thank you very much for that. And then I've just got two short questions about the bidding process itself. The central housing infrastructure, 28.5 million. The question here is, how can we bid for that sort of money when the business cases and the CPD intensification plan have yet to be approved by council?
Yeah, Councillor, what we've done, and it's quite important for us to have done within this application. So we've been quite clear as saying we have a strategic document called the spatial plan that sets out a direction of travel and some intent. We've also shared within our application and spoken at lengths with Kāinga Ora, who are actually assessing this infrastructure acceleration fund, and the Ministry of Housing and Urban Development, how we are going to meet our requirements under the National Policy Statement of Urban Development. So we've set out a direction. We're also really clear that we've had areas of expected growth which formed the basis and were considered within Stavros's 30-year infrastructure strategy, and were also carried through into our long-term plan. So there is a significant amount of intent and clarity about our direction and what we were expecting to spend in different areas. So we've used that as the basis. We also have an understanding of what Kāinga Ora's pipeline is, so we know where they're intending to develop, and that's obviously an underpinning piece of work, so this would assist that. We also have spent a lot of time, and we've reported to you that we're in discussions with most landowners who have an intent to develop about when and where and how large. So again, we're trying to get that detail behind it. So apart from that, our actual district plan does enable investment in the city in the development of apartments in the city. So there's just some tweaking we need to do in that space.
Okay. Then my last question at this stage concerns the expressions of interest. If we total them, they're about 30% of the entire HIA fund. And if asked, do we have a sense of the priority that we're going to give to each of the three projects?
Sorry, I think that the fund was 3.6 billion, of which a significant amount was tagged to Auckland, and there's a number of other metros that have picked it up. So I'm not quite sure where you get, our application is 30% of the available fund.
Well, yes, you're quite right. But even if we're not able to be funded all aspects of our bid, 113 million, we might be asked what priority we would see the East, West and Central projects having. Has thought been given to a revised bid in the light of the total amount available and how much we're likely to get?
Councillors, the way that it's couched, and we have spoken to Kāinga Ora about that, is Western and Central are quite closely linked. Again, I've mentioned in there, and I was at pains to talk about the challenges we have around flooding risk from intensification and already around climate change on the Utahina. So the central solution and the Western solution are tied together. If there's a separation, I'm not saying there's a prioritisation, if there's a separation, Western and Central are linked, Eastern sort of stands alone.
Thank you for that. I'll leave it at this point, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. We'll carry on with questions, and shortly I'll ask for a mover and a seconder so that we can go into discussions. Mr. Berryman-Kim.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. And JP, thank you for your report. I have two questions, but maybe just one quick comment. JP, are you, well, actually now it's a third question. Are you aware of the Te Whata website and work that Kuri Kowhai Makaere has led in terms of adjusting the census data for iwi because it's far more accurate given the 2018 census undercount?
Oh, no, I haven't, but I would be really interested to see that because you're right, there was a significant undercount here.
Okay, just to cover that, oh look, basically if you Google Te Whata, you'll find it there, and obviously Kuri Kowhai Makaere is chair of Tūhaurangi Tribal Authority and is a real leader in this space, as is Karen Verco. So just a aside there to get more up-to-date information. But look, my two questions. Number one, for me, the expression of interest didn't explore things like demand side management, developer contribution or obligations in terms of these developments and things like at-source storage, treatment, disposal. Can this be done, and I'm assuming it's part of the bit that you outlined, the next stage, which is the planning pathway, to help inform future decision making? Because what I'm not seeing in the EOI is what new sustainable urban development actually looks like. What I'm seeing is how we can get more pipes to deal with what we've always done. So that's my first question, and I'll ask the next one after that.
You're right, Eugene. But you've got to remember that the focus of this was about infrastructure investment. So what do you need to put in place in its pipes? You're absolutely right. The next phase is when we have to start talking about what does good look like and what does successful look like from sustainability, from a values perspective, and from a good, coherent, safe, appropriate housing within our neighbourhoods.
Okay, thank you for that. My second question, Madam Chair, regards the Mana Whenua engagement budget allocations. And I've got two questions regarding that. Number one, who is that support for? Is that support for Mana Whenua to be able to engage in these, or is it support for council to engage with Mana Whenua? And my second component to that question is at 600K across a $113 million project, that's about 0.5% of the budget, which is not exactly mana enhancing given what I think we're trying to achieve. So is there room to increase that budget for more meaningful engagement? So two questions there, please.
Yeah, look, Eugene, I think that is a first amount. I think we would have to include engagement and support in a different way. I can see Gina's got her hand up because we have had some discussions on this about the way forward. So maybe I'll just be quiet and let Gina switch on her microphone and camera and answer off this question.
Kia ora tātou. Sorry, the light's not very bright here. Here we are.
Kia ora, Gina. Kia ora.
That's not a cap on the figure. That is an estimate that we've put in that we worked with Te Rotorua Lakes Trust on as an initial estimate. But that's certainly not the final figure. The purpose of that funding is to resource Te Aroa to engage internally. So there will still nevertheless be technical advice and work that we need to do within council. But this is to ensure that Te Aroa are able to engage. We're effectively bringing significant amount of work forward, which will put a massive strain on largely volunteer organisations to actually get out and do the work that they need to respond to council's work. So what we're trying to do is think about what might be the need within Te Aroa in order for them to do their work internally. So the detail of what that looks like will be discussed and agreed with iwi groups once we know where we stand in terms of the funding. But at this stage, it's just really a provision to enable and empower Taurua groups to respond to council. If we don't think about funding in that regard, then what's likely to happen is that we won't be able to get the information we need as council to progress in a timely way. So it's, really a very pragmatic thing that we're trying to do.
Thank you. Thank you for that, Gina. JP, I think this question of communication and how we communicate is going to be a biggie. So that may be something that we do need to think about. And I'm not referring just to iwi, but the community would like to know, actually, that this is exciting. This is something that's going to change the whole look of Rotorua over the next 10 years going out. And so how we start some early communication, I think, with our community is really important. So perhaps we need to get some thinking done around that as early as possible, I think. Councillor Kumar, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning. I'm sorry again. JP, I've got through the chair to JP, I've got a couple of questions. My first question is, thank you for the report, very detailed and thorough. And so based on what I saw there, we talk a lot about housing, but we only seem to be engaging a lot on high density housing. Is there a report or is there a justified need for people wanting to downsize to good quality housing? I mean, this is based on, if we want families to also move to Rotorua, we need to show that we are doing good quality housing to go with the lifestyle that we're trying to promise, live, work and play.
Look, Councillor, you're absolutely right, and probably I didn't emphasise it enough, is we want to have a mix of housing types within our communities for them to be successful and safe and to be nice, and that also extends into the homes themselves. So we need to make sure that there is those good design standards that are brought through. One of the things that, and it also goes to Councillor Okawa Tate's comments there about communications with our community. A lot of the work that's been done in other places that we will be trying to pick the eyes out of is even using things like design guides as a way of trying to say, so show me what good looks like. We currently have rules around where you have outdoor areas or where you orientate a house to get the best use of the sun. So I think, Councillor, what you're asking is, is there that kind of guidelines about, passive heating? There's a whole range of things that we need to be encouraged to make sure not only are we getting enough homes, but actually they're good homes and they're fit for people of all ages and all phases in their life, and they're of good quality and they're safe and environmentally really good too.
Thank you, JP. And through the chair, my second question, if we go to page 37 on Stormwater 13, it talks about going through the Springfield golf course, and the development is going to cost about $10.7 million for the works required to allow for this area. Based on the fact that the golf course is still the golf course and may in the future still be a golf course, is it prematurely that if it's not for, because this IAF funding is only for housing, is the fate of the golf course determined already on this request? Because no kind of funding for housing is going to be approved if this is not going to be for housing.
Yes,
because
correct.
Okay.
Sorry, just answering that off, Councillor. You're touching on an important situation there, and I was trying to highlight it during my presentation. Is one of our big challenges is that to support intensification or infill, so more houses, we have to start addressing the flooding risk and of the frequency and the severity as it heads towards the Utahina and the Mangakaki stream. So that's the first challenges, because we currently have flood risks at the lower Utahina. So what we did when we put the application together is not trying to predetermine any outcome from the discussions that are currently underway about the Springfield golf course. So what we've done there is we just looked at the funding that had been identified and sort of said, well, if there is a golf course that continues, what do we need to do to ensure that we're enabling housing? Now, so I come back to my first statement I made during the presentation is we need to see our green areas as potential detention or spillways or flooding zones so that we can enable houses to be built in the western side of the city or the central part of the city. So whether it's a golf course or not, we need to start anticipating the potential that we may need to look at how we flood, detain or manage stormwater using all of our reserves, and that includes that golf course alone. The alternative scenario, Councillor, which we also haven't determined, which was sort of set out in the spatial plan and has a placeholder in our long-term plan, is the conversion of the Springfield golf course to a reserve area, greenbelt, sports fields and some potential housing. So we looked at how much money we might need. So actually that funding that's included in that application can be used either way. It's to help manage flood risk down the Utahina if we need to use that piece of land, which may still be a golf course, or the alternative use which was put forward in the Westbrook proposal is also covered. So we've covered ourselves both ways. And actually we've got 7 years on the lease to figure out where that fits within that equation and how much more spillway or floodway is required. So that's why that sum is there. And as I say, we've got there in clarity, but like many things, there is a lot of dependencies that go into our forward planning moving forward.
Thank you, councillors. Thank you. Look, I appreciate that we've been sitting and watching our screens and listening intently for the last 2 hours, but I would like to conclude this this item before we go into.
Madam Chair, Madam Chair,
yes,
just
I appreciate that. Excuse me. I appreciate that, but I just would like to say that I would like us to, before we go to conclude this item, before we go into excluded. Now, I understand there are some more questions, and then I'll take shortly a mover in a second so we can open it up for some discussions. Thank you, Una.
Cool. Thank you, Madam Chair. There's 2 more questions. So we've got Councillor Donaldson followed by Councillor Maxwell.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Donaldson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I did have a question, but I'll put it in a comment and I'm happy to move part 2.
Oh, thank you very much. Councillor Maxwell.
Thank you. Right. Just 2 questions. First of all, I acknowledge the mahi JP you and your staff have done. Wonderful. That was a thorough report. Good listening. First one is you touched on since 2013, a lot of growth is, and those data that you acquired that we needed 6,000 homes in our district. Even at the same time, we were going through the spatial plan, and I was very interested in what was happening out in the Nongata area. There were 56 workshops that were held, and there was a lot of keen interest and people happy about some progress being made out there. It hasn't been brought up in your report this morning, but is that still on the table and the radar? Because I can recall we are quite excited about the Special Housing 1 and Special Housing 2. There was a bit of excitement. So I want to know, is that still on the table, still lying there somewhere?
Councillor, the short answer is yes. That was a priority area for us to consider development. And it's probably our most likely area from a hazard perspective to see some additional greenfield that might support the redevelopment of the village.
Okay, and the other one is it follows on a little bit. It's been touched on already by Councillor Kuma. I'm just feeling a little bit uncomfortable about the application that's gone on for about 10 million. We have not discussed or debated a proposal to put housing on Springfield Golf Course, and so isn't that putting it in quite a dilemma? Because at the same time on page 15, I see there where it could be used as a ponding area for some of the stormwater issues that may come up. So if there was housing there, we're talking about putting a bit of a reservoir and ponding there, but we haven't really delved into the discussion or the debate on it. That's part of my concern at the moment.
Yeah, councillors, I think I was trying, maybe I didn't make it clear enough when I answered Councillor Kumar's discussion, is yes, we've put that forward, but actually it still leaves the optionality of both ways. And the key here, councillor, is to say, even if we don't put the Westbrook development proposal in place, which includes some housing, we may still need to look at the golf course land as an area to potentially try and spill and manage stormwater during severe weather events. Now, I suppose one of the things that you have signed off recently is you've signed off a project down through Linton Park. So that's an example of some of the developments that are currently underway where we continue to have an area for recreation purpose, whether it's golf or whether it's another recreation purpose. And at the same time, we're building in there infrastructure to support and to help us manage storm events and severe weather events. So if anyone's got some concerns about which option it might be, you're right, we haven't made a decision, but we have signalled it in the spatial plan and we have got a placeholder in the LTP, but a decision hasn't been made. But if we're thinking about where stormwater management sits, a good example to point people back to is the investment we're currently making into the Linton Park area so that you keep your recreational use, but you're also making sure that you're creating a blue-green corridor that's there for recreation most of the time, but it's also available to manage stormwater and flooding events to try and reduce the severity and the frequency of flooding of private property.
Thank you.
Lastly, we have Mr. Thomas.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to say I'd be pleased to second recommendation 2, since it's been moved.
Thank you very much. So it has been moved and seconded. So what I will do is I'll move that now. Sorry, beg your pardon. We've got a mover and a seconder. So now we can open it up for discussion. Is that correct, Nuna?
That's right, yes. And Councillor Donaldson, as the mover, wishes to speak first.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair, through you. Huge piece of work, JP, and Madam Chair, I agree with your comments about the need for communication on this issue. We need to change the conversation in Rotorua. JP's talked about a legacy of underinvestment. That legacy of underinvestment is on the back of a legacy of over-conservative predictions by a host of statisticians and economists, and one of those economists fell on his sword at the local government conference recently. So that's why we're in this crisis. And in terms like mixed housing and social housing, they're a dirty word to some in our community, and so we need to change that perception. And I think the sooner we get into that conversation, the better, and do that engagement. You know, we have, as has been pointed out, already a housing crisis, but we've got 20,000 people currently trying to get places in MIQ. That's a whole city trying to get into our country right now. And even if only half of them are people returning to live here, it's still a significant number trying to get in New Zealand. We're not the only city. Hamilton is jam-packed, Auckland is jam-packed, Napier is jam-packed with people in transitional and emergency housing. So we do have to push ahead with this ASAP. I'm fully in support of this application going forward. I did have a question, but it was really about current infrastructure projects anticipating significant diversion of water that we're forecasting with this application. But I'll bring that up in another forum, Madam Chair. But fully in support. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dave.
We have Councillor McPherson, followed by Mayor Chadwick, and then Councillor Yates.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Councillor McPherson.
Yeah, and through you, I'd like to move an amendment that the application for funding related to the Springfield Golf Course be suspended until the Westbrook proposal is determined. The reason for this amendment is pretty clear. Westbrook is in the long-term plan, but it's not been approved by council. A report on Westbrook is coming to the very next SPNF meeting, and application to the HIA now would be seen from Wellington as being premature, possibly predetermined, unauthorised, and frankly not a good look. So my hope would be we'd agree to this amendment, tai hoa on a decision around Springfield Golf Course, but allow the rest of the planning to continue. Thank you.
Well, thank you,
Is there a seconder for my motion?
Thank you, Councillor McPherson. I won't be able to accept your amendment. This is for information only, and as you can see, the fund applications have already been submitted. So, I can't accept your amendment. You see,
I must say that I'm very disappointed to hear that, because it means that decisions were made concerning the possible future of Springfield Golf Course without approval of council.
It's actually, these are it's very, very clear what the infrastructure funds are going to be for initially, obviously, and that was made very clear by JP. The fund applications have already been submitted, and we've received other comprehensive information this morning. I'll just perhaps ask for some to make sure I'm on the right track there. JP, they've been submitted, yes, that's correct.
Yes, Madam Chair, they have been submitted, and I thought I'd try to traverse the issue raised through Councillor Kumar that we haven't predetermined any decision. What we've done is to make sure that we have sufficient funding allocated up through the Utahina to provide management opportunities for flooding or to reduce flooding risk. Now, what form that takes ultimately will be based on your next set of decisions about the future of that piece of land.
Thank you very much. So thank you, Councillor McPherson, but at this stage I couldn't accept your amendment. Thank you. Your Worship?
Yes, I'm in full support of this, and I'd just like to say this is more than JP, a great presentation, but I remember an eye-watering workshop where Stavros Michael told us about the underinvestment in stormwater and what we'd have to put into our infrastructure plan. So the coming together of our 30-year infrastructure plan, our spatial plan, and also the work that Gina's undertaken with iwi to help achieve those aspirations all underpin this application. And how amazing to have a fund and for us to already be seen as a partner in a housing plan with central government. So this infrastructure acceleration fund is like a gift that we don't have to hit ratepayers for the level of investment that we really need to enable our housing to actually happen. I've been asked everywhere I've gone Tell me your plans for housing. Tell me your plans. We want to know where we can go. Is it east, west, north, south? This is the coming together of the infrastructure that we need to spend to realise 6,000 homes. And I think it's wonderful. It's the first clear light shone on our housing plan where we've talked about figures, but we're now saying we know where these aspirations need to be met. And we are in a crisis, as Councillor Donaldson said. This is no longer talking about what we were back in 2013 when we talked about sustainable growth as an aspiration for a district that was going nowhere. We've got growth, we've got it coming fast down the pipeline, literally, and we've got to respond to it. I think the other issue for me that I've heard from JP's presentation this morning is the typology of housing that we've really got to look at and the mixed solutions that we need. And what as a community, I agree we need to have is a conversation about this is our housing strategy and where we want to go, because we've got to stop people saying, not in my backyard, don't want it here, put it over there. So that's the sort of lifting our sights to leadership that underpins this application to show, yes, we as a community have done the work with government agencies. I congratulate those agencies for working with us. And this is an eye-watering application into a fund that will deliver the aspirations that we want and hopefully in the long term address the issue that became so obvious after the last lockdown of our homeless, and to raise the aspiration and hope for families, young and old, that we've got housing for all of different types. So this is amazing getting this morning. I agree with you, Councillor Rotorua, that we just need to have that community conversation too. But at this stage, I'm totally behind this, and it's wonderful to see it coming now that we've got to Delta level 2, because we're going to see a worsening of housing as we understand the impact of job loss and poverty in our community, and we've really got to get on with it. So 100% support. Well done, team. There's been a lot of work in this.
Thank you, Your Worship. Councillor Yates.
Kia ora, and thank you through you, Madam Chair. Me mihi ka tika kia koutou, JP. Extensive report yet again provided to us. I'd like to follow on with what Mayor Steve talked about also, which is what you confirmed again in this report, which was around the mixed housing. So we have to remember this is not the first time we've heard about what the mixed housing is going to look like for our community. It's not just talking about what kāinga ora. We've heard about the developers who are wanting to invest here in Rotorua as well and look at the potential for other types of housing. But one thing I would like to talk about also, because within that mix are our silent homeless, and those are the whānau where we have up to 20 living in homes. And I think actually Phil mentioned that earlier too. So me mihi anō hoki kia rātou. One of the things as a board member on a couple of high schools here, we are most excited about is finding out where our learners are going to be living. It's absolutely essential that we can't be saying any longer that not in my backyard, because my backyard includes mokopuna and whānau of our community who also attend our schools. So we are desperately interested in knowing where our kids and where our learners are going to be housed so that we can cater for them better. I think that's the last point I want to make. The last point I do want to make is around the utahina issue. Being a papakainga owner down Whitaker Road, we've been flooded out my whole life. So it's been really nice not to be flooded out over the last 10 to 15 years. Thank you very much. So to see investment going on up in Westbrook, whether it be a Springfield solution or a Westbrook precinct solution, at the end of the day, this is about ensuring that those of our whānau who live in that catchment are not being flooded in future. So I do hope with the opportunity of the fund that's been provided, the application for the fund that's been provided, that we are provided with a solution that supports us all, especially in those low-lying areas close to the lake. Kia ora.
Thank you. And
Next, yes, we do. So next we've got Councillor Kumar, followed by Councillor Kai Fong, and followed by Mr. Basani Tuli.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Kumar.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, as I had stated earlier to JP, with regards to my concerns about what I thought is a predetermination from the way I see it. Anyway, as per JP's explanation, I still cannot rationalize it. And I believe that if Councillor McPherson would have been allowed to do that amendment, I would have supported that, because I don't think, when I continuously hear that as a council we have underspent. I mean, our debt level suggests otherwise. We have spent where we need to spend in infrastructure, but to have this thing hanging.
Stay on message, Councillor Kumar. Stay on message, please. Stay on. Make it relevant to what we were talking about.
It is relevant. It is relevant to what our deputy mayor and our mayor has said with regards to spend as a council. So
No.
I am, Madam Chair.
Come on, make it relevant, please.
No, it is relevant, Madam Chair.
Then make it relevant and make it succinct, please.
No, I am, Madam Chair. I think you've been disrespectful by suggesting otherwise.
Thank you. I'll move on then. Thank you, Councillor Kumar. I'll move on. It's Councillor Kai Fong. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I'll keep it short. Yes, I'm fully in support of the application and the work that's been undertaken by JP and his team. Congratulations for all of that hard work. I think that in the report, JP has outlined that, fingers crossed, if we are successful in getting some funding, and we should hear soon that there will be a community consultation period, and you yourself have mentioned that it's necessary for us to be able to communicate to our community around, what the council's proposing. The presentation that JP presented today had some very complicated concepts, a lot of graphs, a lot of information, and it takes some time to actually work through that, absorb all of that, and actually understand for our community what that really means. But I think it's putting forward, the information and the pathway for a really exciting future, and people need to understand that, and we will have that opportunity, I think, through that engagement process when we get that infrastructure funding. So, yeah, fully in support. And thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Kai Fong. Mr. Basini Tule.
Kia ora, Madam Chair. Yeah, just speaking about the affordability question. So inside the report, it mentions the average price for a house is $525. And when I just checked, REANs say that the average price in Rotorua for March 2021 is $617,000. So it's actually $80,000 more than what our reports are saying. And I think that's something, when you talk about affordability, it's only a matter of time when Rotorua, an affordable house in 2022 is $700,000. And that is not even affordable. So I think when we use the word, we should always be wary that the term affordable is quite relative, and it actually doesn't serve the people that we're trying to reach the most. While the language we use might say one thing, it's 617,000. That is not affordable by any stretch of the imagination. So just to be mindful of the terms that we're using and the practical realities on the ground. I also want to bring up the locality planning, and Springfield comes to mind, and that is always going to be quite a hot topic for myself and for the other councillors. And if these kinds of plans are going to be with the community, please ensure that the community voice is brought forward to us, just so that we don't have to have conflicting information coming from too many different areas. But I just want to make two more comments. One is about if Te Arawa are going to be involved, I'd love to see a rangatahi involved, because lots of these apartments and small houses are going to be for rangatahi who want to work close to the city or want to have a place that they can afford. So I'd love to see some kind of design group where rangatahi are actually part of that design for their future. because I'm aware that we're designing for them, and sometimes they'll have different ideas and different design thinking about what they'd like to see. And just for JP, could we please get some more modelling information? You mentioned quite a bit, and in particular, just more evidence about the modelling, some data, some graphs, just so we can get a better handle on things. Because I'm aware that in places like Springfield Golf Course, I used to live in Ford Block, and Springfield Golf Course acts as a double reservoir to the Utahina. And I'm not sure if really these things are coming to our attention. I've heard you talk about the Utahina at the bottom, but all along there are places where the water collects anyway. So it'd be nice to get some of that modelling information and some on-the-ground examples that we can consider for later. But I do appreciate all the work done in this area.
Thank you, Potawa.
We now have Councillor Tapsell and Councillor Wang.
Thank you, Councillor Tapsell.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I just want to, now that we're concluding this discussion, just remind elected members that it really is time that we level up and raise a discussion from the detailed to the strategic, because as councillors elected to run this city, we need to stop worrying about the detail and start looking at how we're going to prepare ourselves for that future. So there are 2 points that were in this report, and thank you very much, JP and the staff, for preparing such a good submission to this fund. But 2 points I really want to touch on. The first one is that by 2025, what's that, 4 years, we run out of currently zoned land. We run out of currently zoned land. But by 2026, 4,260 homes will be required in 5 years. So it is very clear that we're going to have to start doing things very differently. And I'm really looking forward to providing Rotorua families with the opportunity to have different kinds of houses, to have apartments, and also give our families the tools to create a future for themselves by allowing the opportunity for infill. But it's only through investment in infrastructure that we'll be able to do that. And by infill, I mean if you've got a bit of land on the back of your property, your kids, your grandparents are looking for a home, build it in the back. We'll be able to provide that opportunity, but only through infrastructure. It's obvious that we are in the middle of a humanitarian crisis, but by making good decisions now, the quicker we start, the faster it'll get better. So I just want to thank the staff, but also I know that this is an application to the government, but if we're thinking about that high level, it's also important that people remember what council's role actually is, but the resources that we have available. So I think it's important that people know that of all of the rates and tax that everyone in the country pays, only 10% of that goes towards councils to deal with running our essential services, only 10%. So I do think it is time that the government step up too and help us to fund these essential infrastructure that's required for us to solve this important housing crisis, because we just simply can't afford that on ratepayers' money alone, and we want to keep things as affordable as possible for them. So thank you very much, and I am I'll be crossing my fingers that this application is successful.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Councillor Tapsell. And thank you for reminding us all that to keep the big picture in mind, to look up and keep the big picture in mind, because as you heard, getting into the details serves no purpose, certainly not at this stage anyway. But thank you. And hopefully we are successful in the applications.
Our last speaker is Councillor Wang, and then Councillor Donaldson wishes for his right of reply.
Thank you. Councillor Wang, thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship. And I absolutely support those comments made before me in support of this recommendation, and especially those from Councillor Tapsell as well, that we need to be doing things differently, and we need to be doing it differently. We need to be doing it a lot faster. To keep up with that demand as well. And I'm looking at that projected population growth, and to see that in the past, compared to the 2020 Inframetrics projection, it's almost a 30,000 difference in the projected population for 2040. And that massive gap presents us with this mammoth task of housing, of our infrastructure, of how we actually go ahead into the future as a community as well. One thing that I wanted to talk about actually as well is actually our rural communities as well, our rural land, rural residential, rural communities, that we look into that as well, because I think there's a lot of growth that could happen there as well, a lot of potential. I'm really glad to hear about all the work that is going into mitigating, and I see a lot of, actually all of this work is, a lot of it is mitigation, but our expected climate change effects as well, that has happened in the past and will happen even more in the future. What we need to be doing differently in the future to mitigate those effects, and how we adapt for the future as well. We've seen the effects of climate change and the flooding out in Rotorua quite a few years ago as well. And I think that should always serve as a constant reminder of, our terrain as a caldera, and the problems that poses for us as well. But I'm absolutely in support of this, and like I said earlier on, and actually supporting Mr. Biasanitule's comments as well, including rangatahi into this, because, and I know Councillor Tapsell's mentioned this in the past as well, ownership is so important for these things, and for our rangatahi growing up to have a vision that they can raise a family here in Rotorua, that they can have an incredible lifestyle, that they can have a home. Those visions, I think, is what actually keeps all of this going as well. And so I'm incredibly happy to be supporting this recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wang. And just before I pass to Councillor Donaldson for his final remarks as the mover, look, I do want to, first of all, I want to thank the last two speakers, Councillor Tapsell and Councillor Wang, as our young civic leaders here in the city, to have you speak with such passion on this, that I do support the recommendation, and I do support it. We're trying to future-proof our city for young families. For many of us who own our own homes, we're fine, but we don't want to have a city where we've got people who will be forever renters, or we have numbers of homeless and growing. We don't want that. We want the families to know that they can put down their roots, that they can create their own asset base for themselves, and have a city that really meets their aspirations as well. So to hear you, our younger councillors, speak with passion on this, it bodes well for Rotorua. But I also think we should acknowledge the government. The government has made this fund available for communities to apply for cities to apply for, because we know that there's a housing crisis. So I do hope that we will be successful. And I want to thank you, councillors, JP, for your excellent presentation this morning, and the context in which you have put everything, and councillors for the wonderful discussion that we have had. I want to thank you, your worship, councillors, members of our committee this morning. So I will certainly be supporting this recommendation. Over to you, Councillor Donaldson.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and absolutely tautoko your comments. I just wanted to quickly address the issue of the Westbrook Sports Precinct. That is a red herring to this discussion, as you ruled, Madam Chair. I want to acknowledge the work of Jocelyn and Una in making a commitment that that report on the way forward on that particular project comes to your next meeting of SPNF in October. But the Springfield Golf Course needs to be part of this application simply through the development already envisaged in the upper reaches of the catchment of the Utahina, the concerns raised by Councillor Yates as to what has already happened historically in the lower reaches of the Utahina. And this has been worked through by our infrastructure team in partnership with Bay of Plenty Regional Council. So it's a very solid application. Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll conclude there.
Thank you very much. So it has been moved and seconded. It's been moved and seconded by
Councillor Donaldson and by Mr. Thomas.
Mr. Thomas, thank you. It's been moved and seconded that the committee notes that the expression of interest application for the Infrastructure Acceleration Fund has been submitted. Yes, we do need to, thank you. So it's been, I'll just moved and seconded. Thank you. So I'll now put that motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Oh, raise your hands. Beg your pardon. Raise your hands. Thank you. Oh.
It is carried.
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you for that.
Division, please.
A division has been called for, so that those who are against, thank you. Could you please raise your hands?
I have 2 councillors against and I had one abstention. So Councillor Kumar has expressed that he will abstain, and against is Councillor McPherson and Councillor Bentley.
Thank you very much.
Oh, Madam Chair, you're on mute. You'll have to put your microphone on.
Thank you. Sorry about that. Sorry. Look, before we go into public excluded, I understand that, Jocelyn, this will be your last meeting with us for the Strategy, Policy and Finance Committee, and as the lead for the community wellbeing. So I just do want to thank you, Jocelyn. I know there was some expressions of thanks the other day, but as the lead for community wellbeing, I want to thank you very much for the work that you've done. And I do know that you will be going on to do some wonderful work too with the Ministry of Education. So thank you on behalf of the committee, the Strategy, Policy and Finance Committee. We do wish you very well, Jocelyn. Thank you. Now, councillors, where am I? I'll just get to this one here. Here we go. So I do need a resolution to go into public and
public excluded.
Public excluded. Thank you. Here we go. We've got 3 items. We've got minutes we've got minutes to consider. We've got an update from Crankworks and also the determination of the community grants. So the reason we're going into a public excluded, commercial sensitivity, and to enable commercial activities to be updated on those as well. So Council.
It's moved by Mr. Thomas and seconded by Mayor Chadwick.
Thank you. So it's been moved and seconded that we go into public excluded. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary? Thank you. Thank you. Councillors, could we resume, please? We'll just take an adjournment and we'll resume at 12:30.